They say you can't smell death before it comes. They're wrong. I can still smell it, thick, metallic, mixed with the sharp scent of fierce sweat soaking through my silk thob. It was the morning they dragged my mother into Deera Square. The morning I stood behind bulletproof glass in my father's private viewing room, forced to watch as they made her kneel in the dust. The morning I learned that loving Jesus in Saudi Arabia doesn't just cost you your soul, it costs you everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need to understand how a prince ends up watching his own mother's execution. You need to know what happens when the son of one of the most powerful men in the kingdom discovers that everything he was taught about God was a lie. My name, well, I can't tell you my real name. Not yet. Not while my father's men are still hunting me. But you can call me what the Western media called me when I finally escaped, the runaway prince. The boy who had everything and threw it all away for a Jewish carpenter who died 2,000 years ago. Sounds insane, doesn't it? Let me take you back. Back before the blood. Before the miracle. Before Jesus wrecked my life in the most beautiful way possible. I was 17 when my world started crumbling, but I'd been suffocating for years before that. Picture this. A palace with 42 rooms, each one bigger than most people's entire homes. Marble floors imported from Italy, white with gold veins running through them like frozen lightning. So cold against my bare feet during dawn prayers that I'd lose feeling in my toes. But nothing, and I mean nothing, was as cold as my father's hand when he'd place it on my shoulder and call me my son in front of guests. In private? I didn't exist unless I'd failed him somehow. I had 12 cars I was too young to drive. I had a private tutor for every subject: Islamic studies, English, economics, even falconry. I had servants who knew my schedule better than I did, who laid out my clothes, who tasted my food before I ate it. Protection, they called it. I called it being a prisoner in golden chains. Every Friday, I'd sit in the royal section of the mosque, watching my father lead prayers. His voice booming through the speakers, commanding, powerful, the voice of a man who'd never doubted anything in his entire life. The voice of a man who signed execution orders over his morning coffee and never lost sleep. I wanted to be like him. I really did. I'd prostrate myself on that prayer rug 5 times a day, my forehead pressed against imported Persian carpet, whispering the same prayers in Arabic I'd memorized before I could read. Asking Allah for, what? I didn't even know. Meaning? Purpose? Love? All I ever felt was the carpet fiber pressing into my skin and the hollow echo of my own voice disappearing into a void. You were blessed, Abdul, my mother would tell me, stroking my hair after prayers. She was the only one who touched me with tenderness. The only one whose eyes didn't calculate my value based on how well I performed my role. You have everything a boy could want. Everything except her full attention. Because even then, even before I knew her secret, I could sense she was somewhere else. Her body would be there, sitting beside me in the women's section during family gatherings, her black abaya perfectly arranged, her face covered except for her eyes. But those eyes, they were always distant. Always looking at something I couldn't see. Ummi, I'd whisper. Where do you go? Nowhere, my darling. I'm right here. But she wasn't. And I hated that I could feel her absence even when she was right next to me. The night everything changed started like every other night. Dinner at precisely 8 p.m. My father at the head of the table, barely looking up from his phone as servants brought course after course, lamb seasoned with cardamom and saffron, dates from our own groves, flatbread so fresh it steamed when you tore it. The smell should have made my mouth water. Instead, my stomach twisted into knots. My older brother Faisal was talking about his new investment, some tech startup in Dubai. My father grunted approval. My younger sisters giggled behind their hands about something I wasn't included in. And my mother sat perfectly still, moving food around her plate but barely eating. I watched her. Really watched her. There was something in her face I'd never been able to name. A lightness. A peace that seemed completely out of place in our home, where everything was about control, power, appearances. She looked like someone who knew a secret worth dying for. If you're watching this, and you grew up in a home where you had to earn love through performance, through obedience, through being perfect, you know that feeling. That suffocating pressure to never crack, never question, never feel too much. That was my entire existence. Until I saw the light under my mother's door at 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. Anxiety, my constant companion, had my heart racing, my mind spinning through tomorrow's schedule, next week's exams, my father's expectations. So I got up to walk the halls, something I did often. Our palace was a maze of corridors, each one lined with expensive art my father bought but never looked at. That's when I saw it. A thin line of warm light beneath my mother's door. She should have been asleep hours ago. We all should have been. I pressed my ear against the heavy wood. And I heard her voice. But she wasn't speaking Arabic. She was speaking English. Softly. Tenderly. Like she was talking to someone she loved more than life itself. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for sustaining me another day. Thank you for protecting my children. Thank you for..." My blood went cold. She wasn't praying the way we prayed. She wasn't reciting memorized verses. She was talking. Having a conversation. With someone who felt intimately, impossibly close. I should have walked away. I should have gone back to my room and forgotten what I'd heard. But I didn't. Because for the first time in my 17 years of existence, I heard something that sounded like genuine love. Real connection. The thing I'd been starving for my entire life. I twisted the door handle, she never locked it, and pushed it open just a crack. What I saw in that moment, it set everything in motion. The persecution. The miracle. The execution. My escape. Everything. My mother was kneeling beside her bed, still in her nightgown, her head uncovered, something she never did outside her room. And in her hands, lit by a small lamp, was a book. Not the Quran. I knew what the Quran looked like. This book was smaller. Worn. The pages were marked with notes in her handwriting. And on the cover, in English letters I could just barely read from the doorway, were two words that would destroy our family. Holy Bible. My mother was a Christian. And in that moment, looking at her peaceful face, her tears of joy, her complete abandonment to this forbidden love, I knew my father would kill her if he ever found out. I stood frozen in that doorway for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. My mother's eyes met mine, and I watched peace transform into pure terror. "Abdul." Her voice cracked. The book slipped from her hands onto the silk sheets. "Please. Please, my son." I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely turn the lock. The soft click echoed like a gunshot in the silence between us. "How long?" I whispered. My throat felt like I'd swallowed sand from the desert. "How long have you had that thing?" She flinched at my tone. Good. She should be afraid. Did she not understand what would happen if anyone discovered this? Did she not know what our father did to apostates? Of course she knew. She'd been living with that man for 23 years. 5 years, she said quietly, gathering the Bible against her chest like it could protect her. like it was more valuable than her own life. 5 years since Jesus found me. Jesus? The name felt foreign on my tongue. Wrong. Blasphemous. We'd been taught about Isa, a prophet, nothing more. Certainly not God. Certainly not worth dying for. Ummi, have you lost your mind? Do you understand what you're saying? What you're doing? I understand perfectly. And there it was again, that inexplicable peace. Even terrified, even caught, she had something in her eyes that I'd never seen in the mosque, never felt during prayers, never witnessed in any of the supposedly righteous men who surrounded my father. I understand for the first time in my life, Abdul. I finally understand what love actually means. Love? I was pacing now, running my hands through my hair, my mind racing through scenarios. If I told my father, he'd kill her. If I didn't tell him, and he found out I knew, he'd kill us both. This isn't love, Ummi. This is suicide. This is... Sit down. Her voice carried an authority I'd never heard from her before. Not harsh. Not demanding. But absolute. Sit down, and let me tell you a story. Then you can decide what to do with me. I shouldn't have sat down. I should have left, should have pretended I'd never seen anything, should have protected myself the way everyone in our family had learned to do. But I was 17 and terrified and desperately tired of feeling empty. So I sat on the edge of her bed. And my mother told me about the day she tried to kill herself. It was 3 years before you were born, she began, her fingers tracing the cover of that forbidden book. Your father had just taken his second wife. Younger. More beautiful. More compliant than I'd ever been. I knew what that meant. I'd become irrelevant. Invisible. I'd never heard the story. Nobody talked about my father's second wife. She died in childbirth, taking the baby with her. It was forbidden to mention her name in the palace. I went to the bathroom with a razor blade, my mother continued, her voice steady but her hands trembling. I was going to cut my wrists and let your father find me. I wanted him to feel something. Anything. Even if it was just annoyance at having to clean up the mess. My chest tightened. I'd never imagined my mother, strong, proper, perfectly composed, could have felt that kind of despair. But looking at her now, I recognized it. Because I'd felt it too. That suffocating darkness that comes from being surrounded by people but completely, utterly alone. But before I could, I heard a voice. She looked up at me, and her eyes were blazing now. Alive. Not in my head, Abdul. In the room. A man's voice, gentle but commanding, not today. I have plans for you. You hallucinated, I said quickly. Stress, depression, it makes people. I saw him. She grabbed my hand, and her grip was iron. Standing in the corner of my bathroom, wearing white, with eyes that looked straight through every lie I'd ever believed about myself. He told me his name. Yeshua. Jesus. He told me he loved me. That he'd always loved me. That he died so I wouldn't have to. I tried to pull away, but she wouldn't let go. He showed me my future, Abdul. He showed me 3 sons. You. Your brother. And 1 more I'd lose to miscarriage but would meet again in heaven. He told me to endure. To survive. To wait for the right time. And he gave me a Bible. I don't know how, I don't know from where, but when I blinked, it was in my hands. This Bible. She held it up. The same one you see now. That's impossible, I breathed. But my heart was hammering against my ribs because I wanted it to be true. I wanted there to be a God who actually spoke to people, who actually cared, who broke into bathrooms to stop desperate women from bleeding out on marble floors. I thought so too, she said. For months, I hid this book and told myself I'd imagined everything. But Abdul, I couldn't stop reading it. And every time I did, I felt him with me. Really with me. Not distant. Not silent. Not demanding performance. Just present. Loving. Real. She released my hand and opened the Bible to a page marked with a piece of paper. The English words meant nothing to me then, I couldn't read them well enough. But she translated as she read. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. That's what he said, Abdul. That's what he's been saying to me every day for 5 years. And it's what he's saying to you right now. Stop. I stood up abruptly, backing away from her. Stop it, Ami. You're scaring me. If anyone hears. Your father already knows. The world tilted. What? My mother's face crumpled then, the piece finally cracking to reveal the terror underneath. He's known for 2 weeks. One of the servants saw me reading. Reported me. He's been watching. Gathering evidence. Making sure he has enough to justify what he's going to do. No. I was shaking my head, backing toward the door. No, that's not, he wouldn't, you're his wife, you're the mother of his children, he can't. He can. And he will. She stood up, wrapping herself in her abaya with trembling hands, suddenly looking decades older than her 40 years. He's announcing it tomorrow at breakfast. He's going to divorce me publicly, have me arrested, and make an example of me. To show that not even his own family is above Islamic law. Then run. I grabbed her shoulders, squeezing too hard, desperate. Tonight. Now. I'll help you, we'll get you to the airport, we'll. I'm not running, my son. Then you're going to die. I know. And she smiled. Actually smiled. But I'm not afraid anymore. Because I know where I'm going. I know who is waiting for me. And Abdul, my beautiful boy, my greatest prayer is that one day you'll know him too. I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. This couldn't be happening. My mother couldn't be choosing death over survival. She couldn't be choosing this foreign god over her own children. Over me. You're selfish, I spat, tears burning my eyes. You're abandoning us. Abandoning me. For what? For a book? For a dead prophet? How is that love? She touched my face with both hands, gentle despite my cruelty. One day you'll understand. When you're drowning in the same darkness I was, when you've tried everything and found nothing, he'll come for you too. And you'll know. You'll know this wasn't selfish. This was the only real thing I've ever done. I shoved her hands away and ran. Back to my room. Back to my own bed. Back to the familiar suffocation of our palace where everything was gold and marble and perfectly, horribly empty. I didn't sleep that night. I paced my 40-square-meter bedroom like a caged animal, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe my mother was wrong. Maybe my father would show mercy. Maybe this was all a nightmare and I'd wake up to find everything normal again. But when dawn broke and the call to prayer echoed through the palace, I knew. I could feel it in the air. Something terrible was coming. Breakfast was served at 7 a.m. sharp, the way it was every Friday. The entire family gathered, my father at the head of the table, my brother Faisal on his right, me on his left. My mother and sisters in their section, separated by a decorative screen. The smell of fresh bread and shatters should have been comforting. Instead, it made me want to vomit. My father ate slowly, methodically, his face unreadable. He was a large man, not fat, but solid. Built like the military commander he'd been before politics. His beard was perfectly trimmed, streaked with gray that made him look distinguished rather than old. His hands were massive, scarred from his youth, capable of incredible gentleness or unthinkable violence depending on his mood. This morning, those hands were perfectly still as he cut his food. And that's how I knew my mother was right. When my father was angry, truly, coldly angry, he became preternaturally calm. "I have an announcement," he said finally, setting down his knife with careful precision. The entire table went silent. Even the servants stopped moving. "It has come to my attention that there is corruption in my household." His voice was level. Neutral. Like he was discussing the weather or stock prices. A betrayal so deep, so offensive to Allah, that it cannot be overlooked. Not even for the sake of family. My mother hadn't moved behind the screen. But I could feel her presence, that same inexplicable peace radiating from her even now. "My wife, the mother of my children, has committed apostasy." He said it like he was pronouncing a death sentence. Which he was. She has rejected Islam. She has embraced the religion of the cross. She has brought shame upon this house and blasphemed against the Prophet, peace be upon him. My brother Faisal gasped. My sisters began crying. I sat frozen, my hands clenched so tightly under the table that my fingernails drew blood from my palms. "Therefore," my father continued, "I am divorcing her effective immediately. She will be remanded to religious authorities. She will stand trial. And if found guilty, which she will face the punishment prescribed by Sharia law. Execution." He didn't say the word. He didn't have to. "Does anyone object?" My father's eyes swept the table, landing on me last. "Does anyone wish to speak on her behalf? To share in her guilt?" This was my moment. I could save her. All I had to do was stay silent, support his decision, prove my loyalty to Islam and to him. My mother would die, but I would survive. My sisters would survive. Life would continue. Or I could defend her. And die with her. I opened my mouth. "I object to nothing," my mother's voice rang out clearly from behind the screen. "Your judgment is fair, my husband. I am guilty of everything you accuse me of. I have rejected Islam. I have found the truth in Jesus Christ. And I would do it again 1,000 times over." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then my father smiled. And it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "Very well," he said softly. "May Allah have mercy on your soul." "Because I certainly won't." He stood up, dropping his napkin on his plate, and walked out of the dining room without another word. That's when I heard it, boots in the hallway. Heavy. Multiple sets. The religious police had been waiting outside the entire time. They came for my mother while we were still sitting at that table. Pulled her from behind the screen, her abaya tangling around her legs as she stumbled. One of them grabbed her arms so roughly I heard her gasp in pain. And my father who'd held her on their wedding day, who'd given her 3 children, who'd shared 23 years of life with her, he didn't even look back. But I did. I watched as they dragged my mother toward the door. And just before she disappeared, she turned her head and looked straight at me. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was radiant. And she mouthed 3 words that would haunt me for weeks. "Find the truth." Then she was gone. And I was left sitting at that table, surrounded by my sobbing sisters and stone-faced brother, with the taste of blood in my mouth and one question screaming through my mind. What kind of God is worth dying for? They took my mother to Al-Hayar prison, 45 kilometers south of Riyadh. A concrete fortress in the middle of the desert where enemies of the state disappeared and rarely came back. I wasn't allowed to see her. None of us were. My father made that very clear the day after her arrest. He gathered us in his office, me, Faisal, and my 2 younger sisters, and laid out the new rules with the same cold efficiency he used to run his business empire. Your mother is dead to this family, he said, standing behind his massive desk with his hands clasped behind his back. You will not speak her name. You will not ask about her. You will not mention her to anyone outside these walls. As far as the world is concerned, she died of illness. Do you understand? My sisters nodded through their tears. Faisal agreed immediately, he always did. The perfect son. The one who never questioned, never doubted, never felt too deeply. I said nothing. Abdul. My father's voice cracked like a whip. Do you understand? I understand, I whispered. But what I understood was this: my father was capable of erasing someone he'd claimed to love for over 2 decades. Which meant none of us were safe. Not really. Love in our family was conditional. Transactional. One betrayal away from complete annihilation. That night, I prostrated myself on my prayer rug and begged Allah for the first time in my life with actual desperation. Not the memorized prayers. Not the ritualistic recitations I'd performed 5 times a day since I was 6 years old. Real, raw, broken begging. Please, I whispered into the carpet, my forehead pressed so hard against the fibers that it burned. Please, if you're real, if you're actually there, save her. Save my mother. She's confused. She's been deceived. But she doesn't deserve to die. Please. Please. Silence. The same silence I'd heard my entire life. The void that swallowed every prayer I'd ever uttered and gave nothing back. I tried again. Maybe I wasn't doing it right. Maybe my Arabic wasn't formal enough, my posture not perfect enough, my heart not pure enough. Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate, I launched into the traditional phrases, the ones that were supposed to open the gates of heaven. I beg you to show mercy to your servant. She has strayed, but you are the guide. She has fallen, but you are the lifter of the oppressed. Please, I'm begging. Nothing. Just the sound of my own voice echoing in my enormous bedroom. Just the cold marble beneath my knees. Just the crushing weight of cosmic indifference pressing down on my chest until I couldn't breathe. Have you ever prayed to a God who doesn't answer? Who you're told is listening but who feels a million miles away? Who demands everything but gives nothing back? That was my entire existence. And for the first time, I let myself feel the rage underneath the obedience. The days blurred together after that. I went through the motions like a ghost haunting my own life. Wake at dawn. Wash for prayer. Prostrate myself toward Mecca. Feel nothing. Eat breakfast with my father, who acted like my mother had never existed. Like we hadn't shared 17 years of meals at that table with her. Like her empty chair was just furniture. Attend my lessons. Economics. Islamic jurisprudence. English literature, carefully censored, of course. Nothing that might make me think too much, question too much, feel too much. Pray again at noon. At afternoon. At sunset. At night. 5 times a day, I'd get on my knees and beg a silent heaven for mercy. For clarity. For something. And 5 times a day, I'd get back up emptier than before. My tutor noticed. Sheikh Hassan, an elderly man with kind eyes and a beard dyed orange with henna. He'd been teaching me Quran since I was 8 years old, and he knew me better than my own father did. "You're distracted, Abdul," he said one afternoon, closing the Quran we'd been studying. "Your mind is elsewhere." "I'm fine," I lied. "You're not." He leaned forward, his aged hands folded on the desk between us. "I heard about your mother. I'm sorry for your loss." My loss. Like she was dead already. Maybe she was, in every way that mattered. "Sheikh Hassan," I said slowly, carefully, because even asking could be dangerous. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, my son. When you pray, do you ever feel like Allah is actually there? Like He's listening?" The old man's eyes flickered with something I couldn't name. Discomfort? Fear? Sadness? "Allah is always listening," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was reciting doctrine, not sharing experience. Our failure to perceive Him doesn't diminish His presence. "But have you felt Him?" I pressed. "Not what you're supposed to feel. Not what the books say. But actually felt Him? Heard Him? Known He was real?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Faith," Sheikh Hassan said finally, "is believing without seeing, Abdul. That's the test. That's what separates the righteous from the faithless." "So, no. You haven't." His face hardened. "You're grieving. You're asking dangerous questions born from pain, not genuine seeking. I suggest you increase your prayers, read more Quran, and trust that Allah's wisdom exceeds your understanding. In other words, shut up, stop asking, obey." I left that lesson more lost than ever. Because if Sheikh Hassan, a man who'd devoted 70 years to Islam, who'd memorized the entire Quran, who prayed extra hours every night if even he had never heard Allah's voice, what hope did I have? 2 weeks after my mother's arrest, I snuck into her bedroom. It was dangerous. Stupid. My father had ordered it sealed, servants weren't allowed in, and neither were we. But I needed to understand. I needed to know what could possibly be worth dying for. My father made that very clear the day after her arrest. He gathered us in his office, me, Faisal, and my 2 younger sisters, and laid out the new rules with the same cold efficiency he used to run his business empire. "Your mother is dead to this family," he said, standing behind his massive desk with his hands clasped behind his back. "You will not speak her name. You will not ask about her. You will not mention her to anyone outside these walls. As far as the world is concerned, she died of illness. Do you understand?" My sisters nodded through their tears. Faisal agreed immediately, he always did. The perfect son. The one who never questioned, never doubted, never felt too deeply. I said nothing. "Abdul." My father's voice cracked like a whip. "Do you understand?" "I understand," I whispered. But what I understood was this: my father was capable of erasing someone he'd claimed to love for over 2 decades. Which meant none of us were safe. Not really. Love in our family was conditional. Transactional. One betrayal away from complete annihilation. That night, I prostrated myself on my prayer rug and begged Allah for the first time in my life with actual desperation. Not the memorized prayers. Not the ritualistic recitations I'd performed 5 times a day since I was 6 years old. Real, raw, broken begging. "Please," I whispered into the carpet, my forehead pressed so hard against the fibers that it burned. "Please, if you're real, if you're actually there, save her. Save my mother. She's confused. She's been deceived." but she doesn't deserve to die. Please. Please. Silence. The same silence I'd heard my entire life. The void that swallowed every prayer I'd ever uttered and gave nothing back. I tried again. Maybe I wasn't doing it right. Maybe my Arabic wasn't formal enough, my posture not perfect enough, my heart not pure enough. Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate, I launched into the traditional phrases, the ones that were supposed to open the gates of heaven. I beg you to show mercy to your servant. She has strayed, but you are the guide. She has fallen, but you are the lifter of the oppressed. Please, I'm begging. Nothing. Just the sound of my own voice echoing in my enormous bedroom. Just the cold marble beneath my knees. Just the crushing weight of cosmic indifference pressing down on my chest until I couldn't breathe. Have you ever prayed to a God who doesn't answer? Who you're told is listening but who feels a million miles away? Who demands everything but gives nothing back? That was my entire existence. And for the first time, I let myself feel the rage underneath the obedience. The days blurred together after that. I went through the motions like a ghost haunting my own life. Wake at dawn. Wash for prayer. Prostrate myself toward Mecca. Feel nothing. Eat breakfast with my father, who acted like my mother had never existed. Like we hadn't shared 17 years of meals at that table with her. Like her empty chair was just furniture. Attend my lessons. Economics. Islamic jurisprudence. English literature, carefully censored, of course. Nothing that might make me think too much, question too much, feel too much. Pray again at noon. At afternoon. At sunset. At night. 5 times a day, I'd get on my knees and beg a silent heaven for mercy. For clarity. For something. And 5 times a day, I'd get back up emptier than before. My tutor noticed. Sheikh Hassan, an elderly man with kind eyes and a beard dyed orange with henna. He'd been teaching me Quran since I was 8 years old, and he knew me better than my own father did. You're distracted, Abdul, he said one afternoon, closing the Quran we'd been studying. Your mind is elsewhere. I'm fine, I lied. You're not. He leaned forward, his aged hands folded on the desk between us. I heard about your mother. I'm sorry for your loss. My loss. Like she was dead already. Maybe she was, in every way that mattered. Sheikh Hassan, I said slowly, carefully, because even asking could be dangerous. Can I ask you something? Of course, my son. When you pray, do you ever feel like Allah is actually there? Like He's listening? The old man's eyes flickered with something I couldn't name. Discomfort? Fear? Sadness? Allah is always listening, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was reciting doctrine, not sharing experience. Our failure to perceive Him doesn't diminish His presence. But have you felt Him? I pressed. Not what you're supposed to feel. Not what the books say. But actually felt Him? Heard Him? Known He was real? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Faith, Sheikh Hassan said finally, is believing without seeing, Abdul. That's the test. That's what separates the righteous from the faithless. So, no. You haven't. His face hardened. You're grieving. You're asking dangerous questions born from pain, not genuine seeking. I suggest you increase your prayers, read more Quran, and trust that Allah's wisdom exceeds your understanding. In other words, shut up, stop asking, obey. I left that lesson more lost than ever. Because if Sheikh Hassan, a man who'd devoted 70 years to Islam, who'd memorized the entire Quran, who prayed extra hours every night if even he had never heard Allah's voice. What hope did I have? 2 weeks after my mother's arrest, I snuck into her bedroom. It was dangerous. Stupid. My father had ordered it sealed, servants weren't allowed in, and neither were we. But I needed to understand. I needed to know what could possibly be worth dying for. I picked the lock at 3 a.m., when the palace was silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the distant sounds of guards patrolling the grounds. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get the door open. The room smelled like her. Oud perfume and jasmine soap and something else, something that reminded me of childhood, of rare moments when she'd held me and made me feel safe in our unsafe world. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. The bed was still unmade from the morning they'd taken her. Her abaya hung on the back of a chair. Her jewelry, expensive pieces my father had given her over the years, sat in neat boxes on her vanity, untouched. None of it mattered to her. She'd walked away from all of it without a second glance. I searched everywhere for the Bible. Under the mattress. In the closet. Behind the books on her shelf. In the bathroom where she'd first encountered that mysterious voice. Nothing. The religious police must have taken it as evidence. Proof of her apostasy. A weapon to use against her in court. I sank onto her bed, buried my face in her pillows, and finally let myself cry. Not quiet, dignified tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. Because my mother was going to die, and there was nothing I could do to save her. Because Allah wasn't listening, or didn't care, or didn't exist. Because I was drowning in a religion that demanded everything and gave nothing back. Why won't you answer me? I screamed into her pillow, my voice muffled but raw. What do you want? What do I have to do? I've prayed every prayer, followed every rule, been perfect, why won't you speak? And Allah remains silent. The way He always had. The way I was starting to realize He always would. But in that silence, a thought crept in. Quiet. Dangerous. Undeniable. What if my mother wasn't crazy? What if she'd found something real, something I'd been denied my entire life? What if there actually was a God who spoke, who listened, who loved without conditions? What if everything I'd been taught was a lie? The next day, I did something that could have gotten me killed. I went to the internet café near the university, one of those places where wealthy kids went to play video games and browse websites their parents wouldn't approve of. I wore Western clothes instead of my thob. Sunglasses. A baseball cap. Trying to look like any other Saudi teenager and not the son of one of the kingdom's most powerful men. I paid for 2 hours on a computer in the back corner, where no one could see my screen. My hands hovered over the keyboard. What I was about to do was haram. Forbidden. Apostasy by investigation. If anyone found out, if the internet police flagged my search, if the cafe owner reported me, my life as I knew it would be over. But I had to know. I had to understand what had taken my mother from me. I typed 4 words into Google. Who is Jesus Christ? The screen filled with results. Millions of them. Christian websites. Islamic refutations. Atheist critiques. Historical documents. Art. Music. Testimonies. An entire universe of information about this man I'd been taught was just a minor prophet. Nothing special. Certainly not God. I clicked on the first link. A simple website with a white background and plain text. It said, Jesus Christ is the Son of God, who came to earth to save humanity from sin. He lived a perfect life, died on a cross as payment for our sins, and rose from the dead 3 days later. he offers eternal life to anyone who believes in him. Son of God. That was shirk, the unforgivable sin in Islam. Associating partners with Allah. The one thing that guaranteed hellfire. But my mother believed it. My mother, who was the kindest, most loving person I'd ever known. Who'd chosen death rather than deny it. I kept reading. For 2 hours, I devoured everything I could find. The Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Stories of Jesus healing the blind, raising the dead, forgiving prostitutes and tax collectors. Jesus touching lepers when everyone else fled from them. Jesus weeping at his friend's grave. Jesus angry at religious leaders who burdened people with rules but offered no help carrying them. Jesus telling a Samaritan woman at a well, a woman with a shameful past, a woman any righteous Jew should have avoided. If you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Living water. Not stagnant rituals. Not empty repetitions. Not crushing silence. Life. And then I read the verse my mother had shown me. The one she'd translated in her bedroom. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I read it 3 times. Then 4. Then I lost count. Because that was the opposite of everything I'd ever known. Islam wasn't light, it was heavy. The rules, the rituals, the constant fear of doing something wrong, of not being good enough, of Allah's scales weighing my deeds and finding me wanting. I'd carried that weight my entire life. It had bent my back and crushed my spirit and left me gasping for air in a palace full of everything except the one thing I actually needed. Rest. The clock on the computer screen said my time was almost up. I had 5 minutes left. I should have closed the browser, cleared the history, walked away. Instead, I typed one more search, how to pray to Jesus. The results were shockingly simple. No ritual washing. No perfect Arabic. No facing a specific direction. Just, talk to him. Like he was right there. Like he cared. I glanced around the café. No one was watching. No one cared what the kid in the baseball cap was doing. I closed my eyes and whispered under my breath in English, hesitant, terrified, desperate. Jesus, if you're real, if you're what my mother found. I need to know. I can't keep living like this. I can't keep praying to silence. If you can hear me, if you actually care, please. Please show me. Give me a sign. Anything. Just, don't let her die for nothing. I opened my eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps. Multiple people. Whispered conversation. The sound of a chain being removed. The door opened 6 inches. A woman's face appeared in the gap, Filipino, maybe 40 years old, with kind eyes and a worried expression. "You're the one who wrote?" she asked in accented English. "Yes." "You're sure you weren't followed?" "I'm sure." She studied me for another moment, then opened the door wider. Quickly. I stepped inside, and she closed the door behind me, immediately fastening 3 different locks. The apartment was tiny. Maybe 30 square meters total. But there were 15 people crammed inside, sitting on the floor, on folding chairs, on the kitchen counter. Men and women. Filipino, Indian, Ethiopian. All of them looking at me with a mixture of hope and terror. Because I was Saudi. I could be a plant. A spy. One word from me and they'd all be arrested. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," I said quickly, raising my hands. I promise. My mother, she's being executed in 3 days for converting to Christianity. I need to understand. Please. The tension in the room shifted slightly. The woman who'd answered the door, her name tag said Maria, gestured to an empty spot on the floor. Sit. We were just about to start our service. Service. I'd never been to a Christian service. Didn't know what to expect. In my mind, I'd imagined something formal, ritualistic like our mosque services, all recitation and rigid structure. What happened next shattered every assumption I had. A man stood up. Indian. Young. Wearing janitor's coveralls. He smiled, actually smiled, and said, "Let's worship the King." Then he started singing. Not in Arabic. Not even in English. In Hindi first, then switching to English so everyone could understand. And the song wasn't some ancient hymn or formal prayer. It was simple, beautiful, intimate. Nothing compares to knowing you, Jesus. Nothing compares to knowing you. I want to know you more and more and more. And then something happened that I'd never seen in my life. These people, these foreign workers who cleaned our toilets and drove our cars and built our buildings while we treated them like they were barely human, they started crying. Not sad tears. Not fearful tears. Tears of joy. They raised their hands toward the ceiling like they could actually touch something I couldn't see. They swayed and sang, and some of them laughed through their tears. And the presence in that room, I can't explain it. It was thick. Heavy. Like the air itself was charged with something beyond the physical. I felt it on my skin. In my chest. This overwhelming sense of being seen. Being known. Being loved by something infinitely greater than myself. Maria stood next to me, singing with her eyes closed, tears streaming down her face. And I leaned over and whispered, "Why are you crying?" She opened her eyes and smiled at me. "Because he's here. Can't you feel him?" And the terrifying thing was, I could. I'd spent 17 years praying 5 times a day in mosques and at home, surrounded by supposedly devout Muslims. I'd never felt anything. Just obligation. Just fear. Just the crushing weight of trying to be good enough. But here, in this illegal gathering in a crumbling apartment building, surrounded by people who had nothing, no status, no wealth, no power, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Peace. Real, genuine, inexplicable peace. The singing continued for maybe 20 minutes. Then the young man in coveralls opened a battered Bible and started teaching. "Today we're in John chapter 10, he said. Jesus says, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." Now, most of us here, we work for people who see us as tools. Objects. Disposable. Right? Nods around the room. A few bitter laughs. But Jesus says he's the good shepherd. He doesn't exploit his sheep. He doesn't abuse them. He doesn't demand they earn his love. He gives his life for them. He died so we could live. That's the difference between Jesus and every other religious leader. Muhammad didn't die for you. Buddha didn't die for you. But Jesus? Jesus looked at humanity, broken, sinful, lost, and he said, "I'll pay the price for them. I'll take their punishment. I'll give them my righteousness in exchange for their sin." The young man's voice cracked with emotion. That's grace, family. That's love. Not be good enough and maybe you'll earn paradise. But you could never be good enough, so I'll be good for you. Do you understand? Do you see why this is worth everything? And suddenly I understood why my mother had chosen this. Why she'd walked away from wealth and status and safety. Why she'd chosen death over denial. Because this wasn't religion. This was relationship. This was a God who actually loved. Who actually spoke. Who actually came down to the level of suffering humanity instead of demanding we climb up to him. I have a question, I said suddenly, my voice cutting through the silence after his teaching. Everyone turned to look at me. My mother is being executed in 3 days for following Jesus. Is he going to save her? Will there be a miracle? The room went silent. The young man who'd been teaching exchanged glances with Maria. No one wanted to answer. Finally, Maria knelt down beside me and took my hand. I don't know, Habib. Sometimes Jesus delivers us from the fire. Sometimes he walks through the fire with us. But either way, death isn't the end for those who belong to him. Your mother knows that. If she dies, she wakes up in his arms. Forever. Safe. Loved. Free. That's not enough, I said, my voice breaking. I want her here. I want her alive. Can't he do that? If he's really God, can he stop this? He can, said an elderly Ethiopian woman in the corner. But child, sometimes the greatest miracle isn't the rescue. It's the witness. When Stephen was stoned to death for following Jesus, he saw heaven open. He saw Jesus standing to welcome him home. And the people watching, including a young man named Saul who hated Christians, they never forgot what they saw. That witness changed history. Saul became Paul, the greatest missionary who ever lived. So my mother has to die to prove a point? I was angry now, standing up, my hands clenched into fists. That's not love. That's not. Your mother doesn't have to do anything, Maria interrupted gently. She chooses this. Because she knows something you're just beginning to understand. That knowing Jesus, really knowing him, is worth more than life itself. More than comfort. More than safety. Because he is life. And nothing, not even death, can separate us from his love. I wanted to argue. To rage. To demand they give me a formula, a prayer, a ritual that would force Jesus to save my mother. But before I could speak, the young man in coveralls said, "Do you want to meet him yourself? Not just hear about him. Actually meet him? How? Give your life to him. Ask him to save you. To forgive you. To show you the truth. And I promise you he will. Maybe not the way you expect. But he'll come. He always does." I looked around that room. At 15 people who had nothing but Jesus. Who risked deportation and imprisonment every time they gathered. Who sang with joy in the middle of suffering. Who'd found something I'd spent my whole life searching for in the corridors of empty religion. And I knew I wanted what they had. "Okay," I whispered. "Tell me what to do." They gathered around me, all 15 of them. Placed their hands on my shoulders, my back, my head. And Maria said, "Just repeat after me. From your heart. Jesus, I'm sorry for my sins. I believe you died for me. I believe you rose from the dead. I give you my life. Save me. Show me the truth. Be my Lord." I repeated every word. In English. In that crowded apartment that smelled like cumin and sweat and something else I couldn't name. Hope. And when I finished, when I said amen, nothing dramatic happened. No lightning. No voice from heaven. No vision. But something shifted. Inside me. Like a door I'd been beating against my entire life suddenly opened. Like I'd been holding my breath for 17 years and finally exhaled. Like I'd come home to a place I'd never been. "He heard you," Maria said, squeezing my shoulder. "You're his now. Nothing can change that. They gave me a Bible before I left. Pocket-sized. The pages so thin they were almost transparent. The kind you could hide easily. Or destroy quickly if necessary. Read John first," the young man said. "It'll help you understand who Jesus is. And pray, talk to him like he's right there. Because he is. Even when you can't feel it." I tucked that Bible into my jacket pocket and left Casa Rosa as the sun was setting, the call to prayer echoing across Riyadh. And for the first time in my life, I ignored it. Because I'd found something better than ritual. I'd found a God who listened. That night, I locked myself in my bedroom and opened that Bible to the Gospel of John. I read until my eyes burned. Until the words blurred together. Until dawn light crept through my window and the call to morning prayer reminded me that I had one day left before my mother's execution. And somewhere around John chapter 11, the story of Jesus raising his friend Lazarus from the dead, I read something that made my breath catch. Jesus had let Lazarus die. Even though he loved him. Even though he could have healed him with a word. He let him die. And when people questioned him, when they said, "If you'd been here, our brother wouldn't have died," Jesus wept. Then he said something that detonated in my chest like a bomb. "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." I read it 3 times. Then 10. Then I lost count. Because I finally understood. Death wasn't the end. Not for my mother. Not for Lazarus. Not for anyone who belonged to Jesus. And if that was true, if Jesus really had conquered death, if he really was who he claimed to be, then my mother wasn't losing. She was winning. I closed that Bible and knelt beside my bed. Not facing Mecca. Not reciting memorized prayers. Just talking. "Jesus," I whispered. "I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if you're going to save my mother tomorrow. But if what I read is true, if you really are the resurrection and the life, then she's yours. And you're better at taking care of her than I ever could be. So I'm asking, let me see you. Tomorrow. At her execution. Show me you're real. Show me she wasn't crazy. Please." I fell asleep on my knees, that Bible clutched against my chest. And I didn't know it then, but my prayer had already been heard. The miracle was already in motion. I woke up at 3 a.m. from a dream I couldn't remember, drenched in sweat, my heart racing like I'd been running for my life. The execution was in 4 hours. I stumbled to my bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, trying to wash away the dread that clung to my skin like oil. In the mirror, I looked like a stranger, dark circles under my eyes, hollowed-out cheeks, a wildness in my gaze I'd never seen before. I was 17 years old. And in 4 hours, I was going to watch my mother die. I wanted to vomit. To scream. To grab my father's car keys and drive to Al-Hayar prison and break her out somehow, even though it was impossible, even though we'd both be killed. Instead, I sank to the cold marble floor and pulled out that pocket Bible. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the pages. I didn't know where to read. Didn't know what I was looking for. Just desperately needed something, anything, to hold on to. The Bible fell open to Psalm 23. I'd heard of it. Even Muslims knew about the Psalms of David. But I'd never actually read it. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. My vision blurred with tears. I kept reading. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The valley of the shadow of death. That's where my mother was walking. That's where I was about to follow her. But the psalmist said, promised, you were with me. Jesus, I whispered into the silence of my bathroom, my voice cracking. Are you with her right now? In her cell? Is she alone? Please, please don't let her be alone. And then I felt it. Not a voice. Not words exactly. But an impression. A knowing. Deep in my chest, like someone had written it directly on my heart. She's not alone. She's never been alone. And neither are you. I gasped, actually gasped, because it was so clear. So real. More real than anything I'd ever felt in 17 years of Islamic prayer. Someone was in that bathroom with me. I couldn't see him. But I felt him. A presence so tangible it was like the air itself had become conscious. Aware. Loving. Is that you? I breathed. Jesus? Are you? I've been waiting for you to ask. This time it was words. Not audible. Not in my ears. But in my mind. Clear as if someone had spoken directly into my thoughts. I should have been terrified. Should have thought I was losing my mind. Should have run. But all I felt was overwhelming peace. The same peace I'd felt in that apartment with the Filipino workers. Only stronger. Deeper. Like being wrapped in light. I don't know what to do, I said out loud, tears streaming down my face. I don't know how to save her. I don't know how to. You can't save her. But I already have. Then why is she dying? Why are you letting this happen? Am I? The question hung in the air. Not harsh. Not mocking. Just an invitation. To wait. To watch. To trust. I'm scared, I admitted. I'm so scared. I know. So was I, the night before my crucifixion. But fear didn't stop me from doing what love required. And it won't stop your mother either. And then, as suddenly as it came, the presence lifted. Not gone. But, stepped back. Like Jesus had said what he needed to say and was waiting to see what I would do with it. I sat on that bathroom floor for another hour, holding that Bible, feeling more alive and more terrified than I'd ever been. The sun was starting to rise. Friday had come. It was time. My father's assistant came to my room at 6 a.m. sharp. Your father is waiting in the car, he said, not meeting my eyes. Even he seemed uncomfortable with what we were about to witness. You have 5 minutes. I dressed in my formal thobe white, perfectly pressed, the uniform of Saudi royalty. I looked the part. The dutiful son. The future heir to my father's empire. But underneath, in my breast pocket, I carried that illegal Bible. Pressed against my heart. A secret rebellion nobody could see. The drive to Deera Square was silent. My father sat beside me in the back of his Mercedes, scrolling through his phone, his face completely emotionless. Like we were going to a business meeting. Like his wife of 23 years wasn't about to be executed. I wanted to ask him how he could do this. How he could be so cold. But I knew the answer. This was who he'd always been. I'd just been too young, too desperate for his approval to see it clearly. Power was his God. Control was his religion. And anyone who threatened that even the mother of his children was expendable. We arrived at Deera Square at 7:15 a.m. The execution was scheduled for 7:30, right after dawn prayer. The square was already filling with people. Men, mostly women, were discouraged from attending executions. Some were there out of religious duty, to witness justice being served. Others were just curious. Executions were public in Saudi Arabia. A warning. A spectacle. Entertainment. I felt sick. My father led me to a private section, a raised platform with chairs, reserved for government officials and important families. We had the best view. Front row seats to watch my mother die. I scanned the crowd, looking for something, I don't know what. A miracle? An angel? A sign that Jesus was about to intervene? All I saw were stern-faced men in white thobes and red-checkered shamas. Religious police. Government officials. Reporters with cameras. A few Western journalists in the back, carefully documenting Saudi Arabia's barbarism for their newspapers. And in the center of the square, a wooden post. Stained dark from previous executions. My stomach lurched. "Sit," my father commanded. "And watch. This is what happens to those who betray Allah." I sat. Because I had no choice. Because I was trapped in this nightmare with no way out. The call to prayer finished. The crowd fell silent. Anticipatory. Hungry, and then they brought her out. My mother looked tiny between the two guards who dragged her forward. She'd lost weight, I could see it even under her black abaya. Her face was bruised. Her wrists were bound with ropes so tight I could see the marks from where I sat. But her head was up. Her eyes were clear, and she was smiling. Not a fake smile. Not a brave face. A genuine, radiant, inexplicable smile. Like she knew something everyone else didn't. The crowd murmured. Confused. Executions usually involved begging. Crying. Desperate last-minute recantations of faith. Then Jesus walked through that frozen crowd, touching foreheads. Touching hearts. Moving too fast for me to track, like he existed in multiple places at once. And everywhere he touched, something changed. I could see it, light entering people. Truth entering minds. Seeds being planted in hard hearts. He returned to the center, to where my mother stood, to where I was still kneeling on the platform, tears streaming down my face. "Time will resume now," Jesus said. "But what you've seen, what you've experienced, will remain. Your mother will live. Her testimony will spread. And you, Abdul." He looked at me again, and I felt his gaze burning through every wall I'd ever built. "You will tell the world what happened here. You will run. You will suffer. You will lose everything. But you will gain me. And that will be enough. I will," I promised. "I swear, I'll tell everyone. I know," he said gently. "I've already seen it. Your whole life. Every choice. Every moment. And I'm so proud of you. Proud. Of me." Jesus, God himself, was proud of me. I broke. Just completely shattered. Sobbing like a child. Because I'd spent 17 years trying to earn my father's approval and never succeeding. And here was the God of the universe, telling me he was proud of me. Jesus placed his hand on my head. And warmth flooded through me like being filled with liquid sunlight. Like every broken piece of my soul was being fused back together with gold. "Go now," he said. "And remember, I am with you always. Even to the end of the age." The light began to fade. "Wait." I reached for him, desperate. Don't leave. Please, I need. You have everything you need, Jesus said, his voice growing distant. You have the Spirit. You have the Word. You have the Church. And you have me. Always me. Then he was gone. And time crashed back into motion. The executioner's sword came down and passed through nothing. Because my mother was no longer kneeling at the post. She was standing 10 feet away, the ropes that had bound her lying in a pile at her feet. The crowd screamed. The guards stumbled backward. The executioner stared at his empty blade, shattered, just a hilt and a few inches of broken metal. Sorcery, someone shouted. Black magic. No! My mother's voice rang out, powerful and clear. Not magic. Jesus. Jesus Christ saved me. He appeared. He broke my bonds. He is Lord. The square erupted into chaos. People running. Religious police shouting into radios. Cameras flashing. Reporters frantically taking notes. And my father stood on that platform, his face white with rage and fear and something else I'd never seen before. Doubt. Because he'd seen it too. He'd been frozen like everyone else, but something had registered. Something had broken through his certainty. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see a powerful man. I saw a terrified child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. Pretending to have answers he didn't possess. Pretending to serve a God who didn't speak. It's real, Baba, I said quietly. Jesus is real. And he just saved Ummy's life. My father's hand shot out and grabbed my collar. You will say nothing about this. Do you understand? Nothing. This was a malfunction. An equipment failure. She used tricks. I saw him. I wasn't shouting. Wasn't angry. Just stating fact. I saw Jesus. He spoke to me. He's more real than you. More real than anything I've ever known. My father's grip tightened. You're coming home. Now. And you will never speak of this again. But I was already backing away. Already moving toward my mother, who was being surrounded by guards, by religious police, by people trying to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. I'm not coming home, I said. Not anymore. Because that was never my home. Jesus is my home now. And I ran. Through the crowd. Through the chaos. Toward my mother. Toward the impossible miracle that had just rewritten my entire understanding of reality. Behind me, my father was screaming my name. But ahead of me, my mother was laughing. Free. Alive. Saved by a God who loved her more than death. The guards reached my mother before I did. 4 of them, religious police with long beards and dead eyes, surrounded her, their hands on their weapons. But they didn't grab her. They didn't touch her. They just circled her like she was something dangerous. Something they couldn't understand. Because she was still glowing. I'm not speaking metaphorically. There was light coming from her skin. Faint. Golden. Like she'd swallowed the sun and it was radiating through her pores. Everyone could see it. The crowd had stopped running and was staring now, phones out, cameras recording, thousands of witnesses documenting what couldn't be explained. Don't move, one of the guards commanded, his voice shaking. You're still under arrest. You're still. I'm still a child of God, my mother said calmly. And you can't touch me unless he allows it. The guard reached for her arm and yelped, jerking his hand back like he'd been burned. He stared at his palm, which was red and blistered, smoke rising from the skin. The other guards backed up. Fast. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed Jinn. Another shouted Shaitan. Demon. Devil. Because that was their only framework for understanding power that didn't bow to Islam. But I knew better. I'd seen Jesus. I'd felt his presence. This wasn't darkness. This was glory. I pushed through the crowd, finally reaching my mother. When I touched her arm, there was no pain. No burning. Just warmth. Peace. Home. Ummi, I breathed. What's happening? Why are you? He's protecting me, she said simply, tears streaming down her face. Until we get somewhere safe. Abdul, we need to run. Now. Before they gather their courage. She was right. The initial shock was wearing off. I could see the religious police talking urgently into their radios. Security forces were mobilizing. My father was fighting through the crowd toward us, his face twisted with fury. We had maybe 60 seconds before this miracle became a massacre. Where do we go? I asked desperately. They'll find us anywhere in the kingdom. We're... Stop them. My father's voice boomed across the square, amplified by the loudspeaker system he'd commandeered. They're apostates. Criminals. Arrest them both. Now. The crowd hesitated, torn between religious duty and superstitious fear. But duty was winning. I could see it in their faces. Men were moving toward us. Slowly. Carefully. But coming. And then I heard it. A voice. Not audible. Not external. Inside my mind, clear as crystal. The blue van. Northeast corner. Maria is waiting. I didn't question it. Didn't doubt. I just grabbed my mother's hand and ran. Northeast. I shouted. Blue van. We sprinted through the crowd, and the most amazing thing happened. People moved. Like they were being shoved aside by invisible hands. A path opened before us, straight and clear, while chaos erupted behind us. I glanced back once and saw my father being held back by guards, not his guards, not helping him, but restraining him. Like they couldn't let him chase us even though he was commanding them to. Supernatural intervention. Jesus was running interference. We burst out of the square and into the narrow streets of old Riyadh. The morning call to prayer was still echoing, but most people were inside for dawn prayers. The streets were nearly empty. And there, exactly where Jesus said it would be, was a blue van. Old. Dented. Windows tinted dark. The side door slid open, and Maria's face appeared. Get in, she screamed. Hurry. We dove into the van. The door slammed shut. The driver, the young Filipino man from the apartment, still in his janitor's coveralls, punched the accelerator, and we shot forward into traffic. Behind us, police sirens wailed. Angry voices shouted. The manhunt was beginning. But we were moving. We were alive. We were free. Maria threw blankets over us, covering my mother and me completely. Stay down, she hissed. Checkpoints everywhere. If they see you. They won't, my mother said calmly. Still that eerie peace. Still that faint glow beneath her skin. Jesus promised. He said we'd make it out. How do you know? I asked, my heart hammering, adrenaline making my hands shake. How can you be sure? My mother smiled at me in the darkness beneath those blankets. Because I've seen the end of the story, my son. While I was in prison, he visited me. Showed me visions. You and me in a small church somewhere far from here. Telling our testimony. Leading people to Him. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning. The van swerved suddenly. Brakes screeched. We heard shouting outside, Arabic, sharp and demanding. Checkpoint. I stopped breathing. Beneath the blanket, I could hear everything. The driver's window rolling down. A guard's voice demanding papers. The rustle of documents being checked. Where are you going? The guard asked. Al-Khobar, the driver answered in halting Arabic. Work. Construction site. Open the back. My mother squeezed my hand. Mouthed a single word, pray. I closed my eyes and prayed like I'd never prayed before. Not the memorized Arabic I'd recited for years. Just desperate, simple words. Jesus, hide us. Please. Make us invisible. Protect your people. The van door slid open. I could feel the guard's presence right there, inches away, staring into the van where we were huddled under blankets. What's under those blankets? He demanded. Equipment, Maria said quickly. Tools. Supplies for the job. Silence. Agonizing silence. The guard was right there. And then miracle number 2, he said, fine. Go. Quickly. The door slammed shut. The van lurched forward. We were through. I peeked out from under the blanket just enough to see through the tinted windows. The guard was already turning to the next car, completely disinterested. Like he'd looked directly at us and seen nothing. He didn't see us, I whispered, awe creeping into my voice. We were right there and he didn't see us. Jesus blinded his eyes, my mother said simply. The way he blinded the guards at the tomb. The way he hid from the Pharisees when they tried to stone him. He's done it before. He'll do it again. As many times as we need. We drove for 3 hours. Out of Riyadh, toward the coast, taking back roads and avoiding major highways. Maria passed us water bottles and sandwiches. We ate in silence, still processing the impossibility of what had just happened. My mother was supposed to be dead. Her head was supposed to be separated from her body. We were supposed to be in mourning. Instead, we were eating tuna sandwiches in the back of a janitor's van, driving toward freedom. God's sense of humor, I guess. We finally stopped at a safe house in Dammam, a port city on the Persian Gulf. It was another tiny apartment, even more cramped than Casa Rosa. This one belonged to an elderly Indian woman named Ruth who'd been a secret Christian for 40 years. She wept when she saw my mother. Actual sobs of joy. Sister. I saw the video. Everyone saw it. The whole world is talking about what happened in Deera Square. What video? I asked. Ruth pulled out her phone with trembling hands and opened YouTube. This. Look. It was footage from the execution. Filmed by someone in the crowd. Shaky, amateur, but clear enough. And they're right there, you could see it. The moment the sword fell. The moment my mother vanished from the execution post and appeared 10 feet away. The executioner's confused face. The shattered blade. My mother standing with her hands raised, the ropes gone, her face radiant. And if you looked closely, if you really looked, you could see a figure made of light standing behind her for just a split second before he disappeared. Jesus. Captured on camera. Undeniable. Viral. The video had been posted 2 hours ago. It already had 3 million views. And counting. Comments in Arabic, English, Urdu, Tagalog, dozens of languages. What is this? How is this possible? Fake. CGI. Propaganda. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. This is real. Jesus Christ is Lord. This is proof. Sorcery. Black magic. She made a deal with demons. I'm Saudi. I've been Muslim my whole life. But after seeing this, I don't know what to believe anymore. My mother watched the video with tears streaming down her face. He did it, she whispered. He said my testimony would reach the world. And he meant it. Look at this. Millions of people seeing God's power. The government will delete it, Maria said grimly. They'll scrub it from the internet. They can't let this spread. They can try, Ruth said with a knowing smile. But it's too late. It's already been downloaded thousands of times. Reposted to dozens of platforms. Sent in messages across every social media network. You can't stop truth once it starts spreading. The kingdom is terrified right now. They have no idea how to explain what happened. My phone buzzed. Text messages flooding in 30, 40, 50 in just seconds. From numbers I didn't recognize. Messages in English and Arabic. Is this real? Are you the prince from the execution video? I want to know about Jesus. Please help me. I want to believe. How do I become a Christian? I stared at the screen, overwhelmed. They're asking about Jesus. Hundreds of them. My mother put her hand on mine. This is why we had to suffer, Abdul. This is why God allowed it to get this far. One miracle witnessed by thousands. One video seen by millions. Seeds planted in hearts all across the kingdom, all across the world. Souls that will eventually come to him because they saw what he did today. But we can't stay here, Maria interjected, always practical. Saudi intelligence is hunting you. They'll find this place eventually. We need to get you out of the country. How? I asked. They'll be watching the airports. The borders. Leave that to us, Ruth said. The underground church has networks you don't know about. We've been smuggling people out of the kingdom for decades. We'll get you to Bahrain first, then Jordan, then, wherever the Lord leads. But you have to trust us. Can you do that? My mother and I looked at each other. We'd lost everything. Our family. Our wealth. Our status. Our safety. Everything we'd known for our entire lives was gone. But we'd gained something infinitely more valuable. We'd gained Jesus. We'd gained truth. We'd gained purpose. We trust you, my mother said. Tell us what to do. They cut our hair that night. Dyed what was left dark brown. Gave us Western clothes, jeans and t-shirts and baseball caps. Fake passports with fake names. Malaysian tourists on holiday. The transformation was shocking. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I looked like any other 20-something backpacker. Nothing royal. Nothing special. Perfect. The plan was simple. We'd travel with a group of actual Malaysian tourists leaving from Dammam to Bahrain by ferry. Blend in. Act natural. Once in Bahrain, connections from the International Christian Network would help us disappear. What about you? I asked Maria. What about Ruth and the others? If they trace this back to you. We've been in danger our whole lives, Maria said softly. This is what we do. We save people. We help them find Jesus. And if we get caught? She shrugged. Then we get to go home to him sooner. Either way, we win. Such casual faith. Such peace in the face of death. I'd never seen anything like it in Islam, not genuine, anyway. Just forced martyrdom. Coerced obedience. Fear disguised as devotion. But these people loved their God. And their God loved them back. You could see it. Feel it. It was real. That night, we held a secret worship service in Ruth's apartment. 20 people crammed into her living room, Filipinos, Indians, Ethiopians, Indonesians, and now 2 Saudis. Apostates. Criminals. The hunted. We sang worship songs in whispered voices. We read scripture. We took communion, bread and grape juice, blessed and broken, shared among believers who had nothing except everything that mattered. And when Ruth prayed, when she thanked Jesus for his protection and asked him to guide our journey, I felt him again. That presence. That peace. That absolute assurance that we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Abdul, Ruth said after the prayer, looking at me with ancient, knowing eyes. God has a calling on your life. I see it. A ministry. You're going to tell this story to thousands, no, millions. You're going to write it. Record it. Share it. And many will come to Jesus because of your testimony. Do you understand? I'm nobody, I said. I'm just. You're a prince, she interrupted. Royalty. Someone people listen to. And you walked away from everything to follow Jesus. That's powerful. That's a story that will break through walls of resistance. God doesn't waste anything, child. He's going to use even your pain. Even your loss. All of it. I wanted to believe her. But I was exhausted. Traumatized. Still processing the fact that I'd watched my mother almost die, then watched Jesus save her, then became a fugitive in my own country, all in less than 12 hours. I'll do whatever he wants, I said quietly. Just tell me what to do. I'm so new at this. I don't know how to. You just keep following, my mother said, taking my hand. One step at a time. Jesus leads. We follow. That's the whole journey. We left Dammam at dawn the next morning. Our small group of Malaysian tourists gathered at the ferry terminal, 8 of us total, with my mother and me right in the middle, invisible in our disguises. We wore sunglasses and spoke to each other in broken English, playing our parts perfectly. At the security checkpoint, my heart nearly stopped. The guards were checking IDs carefully. Every person was being scrutinized. And on the wall behind them was a poster, recent, hastily printed. My face. My mother's face. Wanted. Apostates. Reward for capture. The guard took our fake Malaysian passports and scanned them. Looked at the photo. Looked at us. I held my breath. Prayed silently. Jesus, hide us. Please. One more time. The guard's eyes passed over my face, right over it, seeing nothing. He stamped the passport and handed it back. Enjoy Bahrain, he said in bored English. We were through. We boarded the ferry and stood on the deck as the boat pulled away from Saudi Arabia. I watched the coastline recede, the massive buildings of Dammam shrinking into the distance. Everything I'd ever known was back there. My father. My brother. My sisters. My palace. My identity. All of it gone. My mother stood beside me, her hand in mine, watching the same view. Do you regret it? I asked quietly. Choosing Jesus? Losing everything? She turned to me with such fierce joy in her eyes that it took my breath away. Abdul, my beautiful son, I didn't lose everything. I gained everything. I found the truth. I found real love. I found Jesus. And I got to watch him save my life in front of thousands of witnesses. I got to see my son come to faith. I got to watch God do the impossible. She squeezed my hand. Regret? I would do it all again. 1,000 times over. Because he is worth it. He's worth everything. And standing there on that ferry, watching Saudi Arabia disappear behind us, I finally understood what my mother had known all along. When you've met Jesus, really met him, not just heard about him, you can't go back. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you've known. He ruins you for everything else. In the best possible way. The ferry horn sounded. We were crossing into international waters. We were free. Behind us, a miracle that would echo across the world. Ahead of us, a future we couldn't see, but a God who promised to walk every step with us. And in that moment, despite everything we'd lost, despite everything we'd suffered, I'd never felt richer in my entire life. Bahrain should have felt like freedom. It didn't. The moment we stepped off that ferry and onto Bahraini soil, I felt it, the weight of being hunted. Like there were invisible crosshairs on my back. Like every face in the crowd could be an informant. Every camera a threat. Saudi intelligence had reach. Long arms that stretched across borders, into neighboring countries, into places they technically had no authority. The kingdom didn't forgive apostasy. And they certainly didn't forgive public apostasy that had embarrassed them in front of the entire world. That execution video had gone beyond viral. It was everywhere. News networks. Social media. Christian ministries were calling it the greatest documented miracle of the century. Islamic scholars were working overtime trying to debunk it. Conspiracy theorists had a field day. And my father, I'd seen the press conference he gave. Someone showed me the video on their phone while we were still on the ferry. He stood at a podium, flanked by religious leaders and government officials, his face a mask of controlled fury. The woman is a criminal and a deceiver, he'd said in Arabic, his voice cold. She used technology, holograms, special effects, to create the illusion of a miracle. She had accomplices. Western agents who helped stage this propaganda stunt to make Islam look barbaric. But we know the truth. And we will find her. We will find my son, who has been corrupted by her lies. And we will bring them both to justice. Justice. He meant execution. For both of us this time. My mother had watched that video without flinching. He doesn't believe a word he's saying, she'd observed quietly. Look at his eyes. He's terrified. Because he saw what happened. He knows it was real. But admitting that would mean admitting everything he's built his life on is a lie. So he'll hunt us instead. It's easier than repenting. Now, standing in the Bahrain ferry terminal, surrounded by tourists and workers and normal people living normal lives, I felt anything but normal. I felt like a dead man walking. This way, whispered Brother Andrew, a British man in his 60s who'd met us at the terminal. He was part of the underground network, a missionary who'd spent 40 years smuggling Bibles and helping persecuted Christians escape. His face was weathered, his hands scarred, his eyes kind but cautious. Stay close. Don't make eye contact with anyone. We have a car waiting. We followed him through the terminal, past customs, another miracle, another wave through without real scrutiny, and into the parking lot where a beat-up Toyota waited. Get in the trunk, Brother Andrews said. What? I stared at him. The trunk? Saudi intelligence has people watching the roads. Facial recognition technology at checkpoints. If you're visible, you're dead. So yes. The trunk. Both of you. It's only 20 minutes. My mother climbed in without hesitation. I followed, my heart pounding. The trunk slammed shut, plunging us into darkness. The car started moving. In that suffocating darkness, pressed against my mother in a space barely big enough for both of us, I felt panic rising. This was real. This was happening. We were fugitives. Criminals. Hunted by one of the wealthiest, most powerful governments on earth. I'm scared, I whispered. Ummi, I'm so scared. I know, Habib. Her voice was steady in the darkness. But remember what David wrote, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. But I'm telling you, as someone who made that choice, as someone who lost everything and gained everything, it's worth it. Jesus is worth it. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Right now. Don't wait. Don't overthink it. Don't let fear or pride or doubt hold you back. If you want to give your life to Jesus, if you want to know Him the way I know Him, the way my mother knows Him, pray this prayer with me. Out loud if you can. In your heart if you must. But mean it. Every word. Say it with me. Jesus, I'm a sinner. I've lived my whole life for myself. I've believed lies about who you are. I've rejected you. I've ignored you. I've run from you. But I'm done running. I believe you are the Son of God. I believe you died on the cross for my sins. I believe you rose from the dead and you're alive right now. I'm sorry. For everything. For every sin I've ever committed. For the years I've wasted. For the times I've rejected you. Please forgive me. Wash me clean. Make me new. I give you my life. All of it. Everything I am, everything I have, everything I'll ever be, it's yours. I surrender. Completely. Save me. Change me. Fill me with your Spirit. Teach me to follow you. No matter the cost. I'm yours now. Forever. In Jesus' name, amen. If you just prayed that prayer, if you meant it, something just happened that you can't see. The angels in heaven are rejoicing over you. The Holy Spirit just took up residence in your heart. Your name was just written in the Lamb's Book of Life. You just passed from death to life, from darkness to light, from hell to heaven. You're saved. Forever. Nothing can change that. Nothing can snatch you out of Jesus' hands. Welcome to the family. Now, here's what you need to do next. First, tell someone. Find a Christian, a real follower of Jesus, not just someone who goes to church, and tell them what you just did. You need community. You need people who will help you grow, who will disciple you, who will walk this journey with you. Second, get a Bible. Read it. Start with the Gospel of John. Let God speak to you through His Word. This is how you'll learn who He is and what He wants from you. Third, pray. Every day. Not religious rituals. Just talk to Him. Like He's right there. Because He is. Tell Him everything. Your fears, your doubts, your questions, your needs. He wants relationship, not performance. Fourth, find a church. A Bible-believing, Jesus-exalting, Spirit-filled church. You need other believers. You can't do this alone. Fifth, obey. Whatever Jesus tells you to do, do it. Even when it's hard. Even when it costs you. Obedience is the proof of love. And listen to me carefully, Following Jesus will cost you. It might cost you your family, your friends, your job, your reputation, your safety, maybe even your life. But you're gaining him, and he's worth infinitely more than anything you'll lose. I lost a palace and gained a king. I lost a father and gained the Father. I lost wealth and gained life. I lost everything and gained everything. And I'd do it again. 1,000 times over. Because Jesus is that good. That real. That worthy. 3 years ago, I watched my mother walk toward her execution, smiling. And I didn't understand how she could do that. How she could face death with joy. Now I understand. Because I've met the same Jesus she met. I've experienced the same love. I've tasted the same freedom. And I know absolutely, completely know that even if they find us tomorrow, even if some bounty hunter collects that $5 million, even if we die for following Jesus, we win. Because death isn't the end. It's just the door we walk through to finally, fully see the one we've been following by faith. To hear him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into my joy." That's the finish line. That's the prize. That's what we're running toward. Not comfort. Not safety. Not an easy life. But him. Always him. Only him. So I'm asking you one more time, is Jesus worth it? Is he worth everything? For me, the answer is yes. 1,000 times yes. What's your answer? Don't wait. Tomorrow might be too late. Today is the day. Now is the moment. Jesus is calling your name. Will you answer? My name is Abdul, at least. That's what I'm calling myself for now. I'm the runaway prince who watched his mother's miracle. I'm the son who chose Jesus over a kingdom. I'm the refugee who lost everything and gained everything. And I'm telling you from the depths of my soul, with every ounce of conviction I possess, Jesus is real. He's alive. He's moving. He's saving. He's performing miracles. He's calling people out of darkness and into his marvelous light. And he's calling you. Don't ignore him. Don't reject him. Don't wait. Say yes. Today. Now. This moment. Your life will never be the same. But I promise you it will be better. Harder, yes. More dangerous, probably. More costly, absolutely. But better. Because you'll have him. And he's worth everything. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Matthew 16 verse 26. If you prayed to receive Jesus today, please reach out to us. You need community, support, and discipleship. Don't walk this journey alone.